What if one of the greatest stories ever told wasn't a myth, but a memory? Imagine a sprawling city of white stone and gold, where towers touched the clouds and ships crossed oceans before history says they could. They called it Atlantis, a legend buried under waves and centuries of doubt. But what if the legend is hiding fragments of the truth? Today, we're going to follow the trail of evidence, from ancient maps to sunken ruins, that could rewrite everything we know about the past. Before we dive in, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you see human history forever. For centuries, the story of Atlantis has been locked away in the dusty corners of myth. Mainstream historians tell us it's just an allegory, a moral fable from Plato. But what if, buried beneath that label, lies the memory of a real place, a real civilization, lost to a cataclysm so devastating it erased nearly every trace? Imagine cities of marble and gold, bustling harbors filled with ships unlike anything in history books, and knowledge so advanced it would seem like magic to us today. Legends say it disappeared in a single day and night, swallowed by the sea. But the more researchers dig into geology, archaeology, and even ancient maps, the more this legend refuses to die. Stone ruins beneath the waves off India, mysterious structures in the Caribbean, and ancient seafaring technologies hidden in plain sight all point to a chapter of human history we were never meant to read. Some of the most daring voices, historians, explorers, even controversial thinkers, are starting to connect the dots. Not with blind faith, but with evidence, clues scattered across time like breadcrumbs, leading us to a truth too big to ignore. And as the pieces come together, it's becoming clear that the world we think we know might be just a fragment of a much older, much grander story. So tonight, we're going to follow that trail. We'll explore the records that survived floods, wars, and censorship. We'll examine the forgotten maps, the impossible artifacts, and the strange alignments of myth and science that point to something far beyond coincidence. This isn't about proving a fantasy. It's about uncovering what really happened before the waves closed over Atlantis forever. Over 2,000 years ago, the philosopher Plato recorded a story he claimed came from Egyptian priests, a tale of a mighty island civilization that flourished 9,000 years before his own time. He called it Atlantis. It was said to be a naval superpower, technologically advanced and wealthy beyond measure. Its influence stretched across the known world, until a single catastrophic event wiped it from existence. Plato wasn't vague. He gave specific measurements for the island's size, detailed descriptions of its concentric ring capital city, and accounts of fertile plains, engineering marvels, and vast harbors teeming with ships. To him, Atlantis wasn't fantasy. It was a cautionary tale of hubris and moral decay, a society that reached its zenith only to fall in a day and a night of misfortune. For centuries, scholars have debated whether Plato was recounting history or crafting allegory. But here's the twist. Egyptian records, long before Plato's time, spoke of an ancient, seafaring people destroyed by a great flood. Other cultures, separated by oceans, preserved eerily similar flood myths, from the Maya in Central America to the Sumerians in Mesopotamia. This raises the question, was Plato's account an isolated legend? Or was he passing down a memory echoed across civilizations, distorted over thousands of years, but rooted in real events? The consistency in these myths is hard to ignore. They speak of sudden destruction, of oceans rising, of entire cultures swallowed whole. And when you overlay these stories with geological data, like the rapid sea level rise at the end of the last ice age, roughly 11,600 years ago, Plato's timeline stops feeling like coincidence. It begins to align almost perfectly, with a global cataclysm that reshaped coastlines and erased whole chapters of human history. If that's true, then perhaps the story of Atlantis isn't a moral fable at all, but a survivor's message passed through time like a bottle tossed into the ocean, waiting for someone thousands of years later to finally pull it ashore. Around 11,600 years ago, Earth's climate shifted dramatically. Scientists call it the end of the Younger Dryas, a sudden warming period that melted vast ice sheets. Sea levels didn't just rise slowly over centuries, they surged, in some cases by dozens of meters within a human lifetime. Imagine entire coastlines swallowed in a generation, fertile plains, thriving ports, and any city unlucky enough to sit near the shore simply gone. Archaeologists estimate that over 10 million square miles of habitable land vanished beneath the waves during this period. That's the equivalent of losing all of modern Europe's coastline. This wasn't just a local disaster, it was global. In North America, glacial lakes the size of modern seas burst through ice dams, sending torrents of water rushing toward the oceans. In Asia, vast river deltas disappeared under encroaching tides. In what is now Indonesia, the Sunda Shelf was once a connected landmass, home to rich ecosystems and possibly advanced settlements, until it was drowned. Geological evidence supports this. Core samples taken from the seabed show sudden layers of sediment from massive floods. Fossilized shorelines, now hundreds of feet underwater, trace the shape of ancient coasts. And here's where it gets intriguing. Many of these submerged zones sit precisely where ancient myths place lost kingdoms and legendary lands. If Atlantis, or a civilization like it, did exist near these flood-prone regions, its destruction would have been swift and total. Survivors would be forced inland, their ports and monuments lost to the sea, their knowledge scattered. Over generations, their story would morph into legend, keeping only the fragments vivid enough to survive the telling. When you line up Plato's timeline, the global flood myths, and the physical evidence of a sudden sea level rise, the pieces start fitting together. And it's no longer a matter of if something happened. It's about uncovering exactly what and who was lost beneath those ancient waters. All over the globe, just beyond the reach of our shorelines, lie cities frozen in time beneath the waves. These aren't random rock formations or the work of imagination. They're carefully laid stones, geometric walls, and even streets, preserved where the ocean now rules. Off the coast of India, near the city of Dwarka, divers have found vast stone structures resting 120 feet underwater. Carvings still visible on some walls suggest human hands shaped them long before the sea claimed them. Radiocarbon dating of artifacts recovered from the site points to a time over 9,000 years ago, eerily close to Plato's date for Atlantis's fall. In Japan, the Yonaguni monument stuns visitors with its massive terraces and sharp right angles, resembling a sunken ziggurat. While some debate whether it's natural or man-made, the alignment of its steps and pillars suggests deliberate construction. And then, there's the haunting fact that this site would have been above water before the post-Ice Age floods. The Mediterranean hides its own secrets. Submerged ports along the coast of Egypt, including Heracleion and Canopus, were once bustling trade hubs before earthquakes and rising seas sent them to the bottom. Statues of gods, stone streets, and massive columns still stand silently in the blue, like echoes of a world that ended too quickly. Each of these sites shares a pattern: prime coastal real estate, sophisticated construction, sudden submersion. It's as if ancient people knew how to build, but couldn't foresee the catastrophe that would erase their cities from the map. Or perhaps they did know. But the scale of the disaster was too great to outrun. When seen individually, these ruins are fascinating, but when connected, they start to form a bigger picture, a network of ancient sea-facing civilizations, all meeting the same watery fate. And if even one of these cities belonged to a culture like Atlantis, then maybe the legend isn't just a story. It's a survivor's memory of a world we've only begun to rediscover. From the jungles of South America to the frozen lands of the Arctic, nearly every culture carries a story about a great flood. Some call it myth, but what if it's memory? A memory of a catastrophe so vast it reshaped the map and erased entire civilizations overnight. The Sumerians spoke of Ziusudra, saved from a world-drowning storm by a divine warning. The ancient Greeks told of Deucalion and Pyrrha, survivors who repopulated the earth after the gods sent a flood. In the Americas, the Maya recount a time when the sky fell and waters swallowed the cities of their ancestors. Even the Aboriginal peoples of Australia preserved tales of rising seas that claimed their coastal lands. Scientists now know that at the end of the last ice age, sea levels rose over 400 feet worldwide. That's enough to bury entire continents' worth of coastline, exactly where most advanced ancient settlements would have been. Some of these legends even describe details that align with geological records: massive rains, earthquakes, and fire from the sky. Such descriptions could match the aftermath of a comet impact, like the one proposed in the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which suggests a sudden climate shift about 12,800 years ago. If that event happened, and if advanced coastal civilizations existed at the time, their cities would now be submerged, their memory surviving only through oral traditions passed down for millennia. Myths, in that sense, aren't just stories, they're coded history. And when the same story appears again and again across cultures that never met, maybe that's not coincidence. Maybe it's the world remembering Atlantis, not as a fantasy, but as a shared trauma carried in the DNA of human storytelling. In the ruins of Pumapunku in Bolivia, colossal stone blocks lie scattered like a giant's abandoned toy set. Some weigh over 100 tons, yet they're carved with such precision that even modern laser tools would struggle to replicate their perfect interlocking joints. These blocks aren't just big, they're engineered with microscopic accuracy, featuring perfectly flat surfaces and drilled holes that match industrial standards. And yet, according to the official timeline, these were made by people with no metal tools, no wheels, and no writing system. Then there's the Antikythera mechanism, pulled from a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera. It's a complex analog computer made of bronze gears, capable of predicting eclipses and tracking planetary positions with mind-blowing accuracy. Mainstream history says such mechanical sophistication didn't exist until 2,500 years later. If civilizations in the distant past had access to this kind of technology, how much else have we underestimated? Could they have measured the Earth's circumference long before Eratosthenes? Could they have navigated global oceans without modern tools? Evidence of advanced metallurgy, astronomical alignments in megalithic sites, and precise city planning suggests that ancient engineers weren't stumbling in the dark. They were operating with a level of knowledge that simply shouldn't have been possible unless they inherited it from an even older, lost civilization. And that's the thread that keeps unraveling. The more you pull, the harder it is to believe the official story. Because if they had the technology they shouldn't have had, then maybe the story of Atlantis isn't just about a place. It's about the legacy of a civilization whose fingerprints are still etched in stone, metal, and myth. Around 11 to 600 years ago, something extraordinary happened. Global temperatures spiked, glaciers melted, and sea levels rose by more than 400 feet. Entire coastlines vanished beneath the waves, and with them, countless human settlements. Geologists call this event the end of the Younger Dryas, a sudden climate shift so severe it reshaped the face of the planet. And here's where it gets interesting. Plato's account of Atlantis places its destruction at the exact same time. Core samples pulled from the Greenland ice sheet show a thin, dark layer of platinum-rich dust, hinting at a possible cosmic impact, a theory supported by the discovery of massive crater-like depressions under the ice. Whether it was a comet, an asteroid, or another cataclysmic force, the effect was the same: global flooding, earthquakes, and the collapse of ecosystems. Now imagine an advanced maritime culture living along Ice Age coastlines, thriving in fertile, temperate zones that are now hundreds of feet underwater. If their cities and ports were swallowed by the sea, no wonder so little evidence remains on land today. Underwater archaeology has already revealed sites like Dwarka in India, Yonaguni in Japan, and structures off the coast of the Bahamas, ancient, megalithic, and suspiciously aligned to celestial events. Each discovery pushes the timeline of civilization further back, inching closer to the world Atlantis might have been. It's not just myth meeting science, it's myth finally being reinforced by science. And that's where the story starts to shift from legend to possible history. If the evidence for Atlantis is hiding in plain sight, why don't we hear about it in history class? The answer might not be as mysterious as it seems, but it is unsettling. Mainstream archaeology operates on consensus. Once a timeline is agreed upon, any artifact, structure, or document that doesn't fit is often labeled an anomaly, misinterpretation, or outright forgery. Not because every scholar is malicious, but because challenging the consensus means tearing apart decades, sometimes centuries, of accepted theory. And then there's the question of control. The official version of history shapes how we see ourselves, our origins, and even our potential. If humanity had once reached a level of advancement equal to or beyond ours and lost it, it forces us to face uncomfortable truths about our own vulnerability. Take the Piri Reis map, for example. It's displayed in a museum, admired as a curiosity, but rarely taught as a genuine clue to a forgotten chapter of civilization. Or the underwater ruins off Yonaguni. They're explained away as natural rock formations, despite geometric precision that rivals stonework on land. Suppression doesn't always look like burning books or locking artifacts in vaults. Sometimes it's simply never putting them in the textbooks, never funding the excavations, never connecting the dots. Over time, the trail grows cold, and the narrative becomes set in stone. But the thing about buried history is that the ground shifts. Sooner or later, the truth starts pushing its way back to the surface. And that's exactly what's happening right now. If Atlantis really existed, then it didn't vanish without leaving fingerprints on the world. You can still see its shadow, hidden in myths, scattered in architecture, whispered in ancient traditions. Consider the shared flood legends, from Mesopotamia's Epic of Gilgamesh, to the stories of Manu in India, to the Great Deluge in Native American traditions. They all speak of an advanced age cut short by a cataclysm. Different cultures, oceans apart, yet telling eerily similar tales. Then there's the stonework, megalithic sites like Sacsayhuaman in Peru, Nan Madol in Micronesia, and the temples of Malta all feature engineering precision we struggle to match today. Could these be the echoes of Atlantean craftsmanship passed through generations? Long after the empire itself was gone, even our sciences might carry their fingerprints. Ancient astronomical alignments found in sites from Egypt to Cambodia suggest a shared knowledge of the stars and possibly navigation that could trace back to a common source. Not primitive guesses, but deliberate, calculated mastery. The legacy of Atlantis, if real, wouldn't just be ruins. It would be the seed of every great leap forward in human culture, scattered to survivors who carried fragments of its wisdom across the globe. Over time, those fragments became the foundation of new civilizations, each one adding its own layer of myth and memory, and maybe, just maybe, Every time we uncover one of these fragments, we're not just finding the past. We're touching the hand of a civilization that refused to be forgotten. So, maybe Atlantis was never meant to be just a myth. Maybe it was a warning, a reminder, a mirror showing us both the heights humanity can reach and how quickly it can all be swept away. When we look at the pieces, the maps, the ruins, the myths, they don't just tell us about a lost world. They tell us about resilience, about survival, about the human spirit's ability to carry light through the darkest of times. The real question isn't whether Atlantis existed exactly as Plato described. It's whether we're ready to accept that history is far older, far richer, and far stranger than we've been taught. And if that's true, what else have we lost? What else is still out there, buried under ice, under oceans, under centuries of silence? If you've made it this far, you're the kind of person who's not afraid to question the official story, and that's exactly the kind of curiosity that keeps these mysteries alive. So, before you go, hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and drop a comment with your thoughts. Do you think Atlantis was real, or is it still just a legend? And of course, subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the mysteries they don't want you to know about. Because the truth is out there, and together, we're going to find it.